Welcome back to College Football Addiction. We've got one of your favorites back on tonight, Sports Talk Jay. How you doing, bud?
Hey, man, doing fine.
Good. We're a week or so, almost 2 weeks out from the end of the 2024 season. And so, of course, it's already time to start talking about 2025. But before we do that, how do Tennessee fans feel about the year? Like, fans are unrealistic and unreasonable, but can they step back and just say hey man, this was a pretty good year, right? Like you got the argument. We ran into the buzzsaw that was Ohio State. We just kind of got unlucky with that matchup, but are they able to step back and be reasonable about the year?
No. No. They were happy until the Ohio State game. We were having a party up here, and we were having fun messing with Ohio State, which is just what we do. Football's not only important as far as winning and losing; it's also a big source of entertainment for us.
Sure.
So we like messing with the other teams and doing all the crap that we do. But no, 42-17 didn't suit us at all, and that put a really bad taste in our mouth going into the offseason, which we're not used to. We've been winning bowl games and we've been doing this, and that really stunk.
Did it help at all that at least they did that to the number one team in the country the week after? Like, can you kind of step back and say at least they did it to everybody else too?
Yeah, a little bit. It was they just put 31-0 on the number one team in the country after putting 21-0 on us starting out. And I was like, well, I knew when I watched that Ohio State game, I was like, these guys have too much talent for us. Yep. Those wide receivers, we couldn't stay with them. And we had two really good cornerbacks that did a great job all year, and we could not stay with that Smith dude. And they had Carnell Tate's their third wide receiver. I mean, he's a big-time five-star. So they have spent the money in all the right places, and that's what I was concerned about with OSU. I said, if they come out and throw on us and really focus on that, it's going to be difficult to stay with them, especially on their home field.
So looking at 25, how big is it to get Tim Banks back next year?
Yeah, that was important. We had to do that. You don't want to lose that continuity, and he'd had a great year last year, really. I know that the ending wasn't good. And look, had he kept going the way it was going, he might have got a head coaching job somewhere, which is what I thought was going to happen. But the ending being like the way that it was, it kind of dampened that. But Clemson went after him. Who else went after him?
I think Miami was in talks too, yeah.
Yeah, so they went after him, which I think was a smart move on his part, which was, hey, I'm going to go talk to these folks so I can get a raise.
Yeah.
And he was going to get one anyway, but he got a bigger raise because of that.
Yeah, I don't know who his agent is, but if it's the guy that represents everybody else in college football, there's always a method to that madness. What grade would you give Nico this year in 24? And then where does he need to get to next year?
Probably a B+ because he was a redshirt freshman, and I take that into consideration. I look at how the other redshirt freshmen played as quarterbacks, and quarterback is such a unique position. It's really hard for your first year to go out there and just tear it up. Clemson had that one guy that did that, but that's the exception, not the rule. I thought he was fine. He threw for 2,600, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions or whatever it was. And he started running the ball. They wouldn't let him run because he's skinny, and we didn't have enough backup situation. Pat, how it is with backups. It can really put you in a bad spot, even though Gaston was maybe good. You don't want to find out.
Sure.
So I thought he did fine. I would give him a B+. And I think you'll see the biggest jump, and you usually do with quarterbacks, from year 1 to year 2. So I'm cutting him a lot of slack and saying he had a good, solid first year, and he played within the scheme that was put in front of him.
It feels like for Tennessee to make that jump, right? Like as an outsider, it feels like they could be we'll talk about the schedule here in a minute, but they could be a really good team, right? And maybe be competing for another playoff spot. But for them to turn into a competitor, he has to be the difference maker, right? Samson gone. They did lean on the defense a lot this year. For them to go from really good, bottom, road playoff game to really competing for this thing in a stacked SEC. And then you get out of the SEC to the playoff, and you obviously have to run into the Ohio States and Oregons and Notre Dames too. He would need to be really good. So if he does bump up to that A range, that's where I think Tennessee could see a really nice year.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about our schedule. We've got to play Florida in the Swamp. We've got to play Alabama in Birmingham. Last year we didn't, and we barely beat both of those teams, which was, look, getting that monkey off our back completely down there in the Swamp would be huge. We need to do that. That's one of the reasons I am glad we're playing them there. But it's a tougher schedule for us. So yeah, it's going to be up to him to really take a jump up if we're going to make the playoff next year. It will not be quite as easy as it was this year because our schedule laid out a little better.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the schedule in a minute, but what have you thought about how they've done in the portal?
We don't do a ton in the portal, honestly. We'll get like 4 or 5 or 6 players. We don't build our team on that, or at least Heupel doesn't. I say we like I'm on the team or something. Sometimes you feel like you are. We don't really build it in the portal. We just try to fill spots. So I don't know. It's hard to really judge that. We're not Ole Miss or some of these other teams like LSU that's really piled into the portal.
Yeah. When you mention the schedule, obviously it's the same as last year, but you flip home and away. The UF fans are absolutely petrified. And now I know they've won however many in a row, like they keep winning this game in the Swamp, but they remember back to 2001, where because of the terrorist attacks, the game got moved to the end of the year. And I mean, Allie, but Allie's on here the other day with me making excuses. Well, if they had a running back that was hurt the week we would have played them, and he was healthy the last week, and Ernest Graham was out the last week for us. And so if we'd have played them earlier, blah, blah, blah. But I do think they're worried about I think it's just the PTSD from 2001. But playing at them at the end of the year is really weird. And Tennessee does seem to peak at the end of the year. And so, I don't know, I kind of like Tennessee in that spot because of how it sets up. Now, I'm not predicting a game that's 10 months from now. But I do think that playing it so late, and I believe it's sandwiched in between a trip to Ole Miss and they play Florida State, obviously, the very next week, the last week of the year. And so I think not playing, like usually they play Tennessee after like 3 cupcakes in the Swamp, and then Tennessee's that third week. I think having to play it now at the very end of the year, when you are all beat up, when you've got Ole Miss, a trip to the Grove, and then the Seminoles the next week, hopefully they're a little bit better, obviously. But I think that the intrigue around that game late in the year is pretty good. It could be, say you've dropped to Georgia and Bama. It could be for a spot to the playoffs. Like it could be, it could be to keep one team, alive for the postseason.
Yeah, well, I'm for any change that has occurred because the last 15 years, it hasn't worked for us playing early with Florida. So later is better as far as I'm concerned. And, I do like the fact they're playing Ole Miss and then you guys. And hopefully, your new quarterback will do a good job for you. I do like the fact he's a running quarterback. So maybe he can get you back on track to where you deserve to be. And that will concern Florida as well because that's such a huge game for Florida. And they'll say our game is huge with them because it is, but they still, man, playing Florida State the next week, that's those bragging rights in-state thing that even this year, Florida State showed up.
Yeah.
It looked bad at the end, but if you'd have had a good quarterback in there, that was really balling, you probably won the game.
Yeah, it was actually pretty wild. You lose a game by 20 points, 17 points off of turnovers, right? So you cut it down to 3. And then you say, well, we got stopped inside of their 33 times, right? You make 2 field goals. Now the game may not play out the same way, but yeah, just a masterclass in giving it away. But you're right. Like I thought we played better than I expected, right?
Yeah, you showed up. They at that in-state stuff, man. I've seen that with Auburn and Alabama, and you'll think Auburn can't smell Alabama. And they give them a game, man, every time.
Yeah. That one's going to be interesting because obviously the pressure is on Hugh Freeze to win.
Yes.
The pressure is very much on DeBoer to win. It's in Jordan Hare. I'm hoping that when we play Florida that weekend, it is not at the same time slot because the Iron Bowl this year is going to be must see.
Yeah. And for us, I'm really hoping it's not an 8:00 game or a 7:00 game. I know it probably will be.
Yeah.
That's man, Florida fans, they get so fortified and they start losing their mind. And high top guy, man, he gets so fired up. And so he would be crowing. So it'll just be awful. We need to
brutal
down there.
Yeah. We'd won a couple in a row, but yeah, after losing to them this year, he let us have it. So
he's great at that, man. I'm telling you, you don't want to lose to that guy.
Yeah, it's like you were mentioning your fans giving Ohio State fans a hard time. I forgot to say it then, but yeah, I'm aware just from the baseball stuff on Twitter and playing
Oh
you
yeah,
guys
we're
in.
awful.
Oh man, you guys are brutal.
Well, it really is. It's almost like a very important hobby to these folks up here that they just love to mix it up and give grief, and we don't take it well either. So we're very thin skinned. So it's just it is what it is, man.
So you mentioned the schedule, and again, I do get the, having to go on the road to Tuscaloosa, having to go on the road to Gainesville. The tough, I mean, you're playing a 10-win team in Syracuse to open it up now,
Yeah.
new quarterback there. So maybe things are a little bit different. And I don't know if Fran Brown has them winning 10 games again next year. I mean, I certainly would like to see it because we don't play them, so I don't care. But,
Right.
and then Georgia up there in Neyland, Georgia really early in the year, like that to open up SEC play with that one is wild. So 4 really tough ones. If you could go 2-2 there and just manage the rest of the season, I mean, you sneak in, right? Like if you beat all the teams you're supposed to beat and go 2-2 in those big 4, I think Oklahoma will be better. I don't know if they're going to win up in Neyland. Um, Obviously, you can't have a slip up like you did against Arkansas, but I do think that the schedule is somewhat navigatable. Is that maybe a good way
Yeah.
to put it?
Yeah, it's not a bad schedule. It's just it was just better last year. But
Yeah.
I think Nico will be a better quarterback. And look, there's just nothing more important than your quarterback play. It is critical. I think that's what really hurt Florida State badly this year was your quarterback play. I think had it been solid and good, yeah, you wouldn't have won a ton of games. You'd have won at least 6. I
Yeah.
mean, I watched you guys, and what happens when your quarterback doesn't play well, the rest of the team just pulls back. They like lose that inspiration. Whereas if your quarterback plays well, they play with their hair on fire. And I've watched
Mhm.
it so many times. That's why, it's just so critical to have that great quarterback. Y'all had a great one when you went undefeated. And boy, what a difference he made.
Well, you talk about that, but I hate to give him credit, and maybe you'll hate me for saying this, but like I think you saw that with the team in Gainesville this year. Like they had a guy that they absolutely believed in DJ Lagway,
Yep.
and man, I mean that Lagway Nico battle is going to be great this year in the small. You mentioned that, but like they were 6-0 in games he started and finished. Right, the one loss that he started was when he went out against Georgia. They had a 2-score lead, I
They
think, when
were
he
going to
got
win
hurt.
that ball game.
Yes, they were going to beat them,
They
and
were going to
so
win that ball game. DJ,
yeah.
that team plays different behind DJ Lagway.
Yeah. And they play, like you just said, with their hair on fire. They have a leader they believe in.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I also think like as much grief as we give Napier, I think they do really like him. I think he's a good players coach. And I think they fought hard for him too and saved his job. But they play different behind Lagway. And you're right. Like if Tennessee can do the same for Nico, if Florida State can do the same behind Castellanos or whatever, right? Like every team is going to be a little bit different. But then when you can rally around that leader and that leader is that difference maker, it is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talking on that, Georgia plays, we were talking about the Georgia game early in Neyland. Obviously, we have the questions about their quarterback. I mean, it seems like it's going to be Gunner at this point, unless something crazy happens in spring. But they play a couple of absolute cupcakes to start the year. And then you guys kind of get that tune up with Syracuse early. And then Georgia comes to town. Nico having more experience maybe puts them in a little bit better of a spot, puts you guys in a little bit better of a spot for that game. Now, beating Georgia is still incredibly tough, and Texas couldn't even do it with Gunner in there. But I do think that kind of provides an interesting angle. Obviously, Gunner will get a ton of reps against really bad competition to get some game action, and he's not, I'm not trying to paint him as bad or anything, but I think it'll be a little different when he has to go in front of 100,000 crazies up there in Neyland Stadium.
Yeah, we're a different team in Neyland. We still struggle though against teams that finished 1 or 2 in recruiting like the last 10 years. That seems to be a major problem for us, like every team. So at least at Neyland, we have an opportunity to beat them. It'll still be a big upset, in my opinion, to be able to take Georgia out, but I think it's doable. It's
Yeah.
absolutely doable, and we need to get that monkey out. Man, I'm telling you, when you play Georgia and Alabama every year, it seems like you got a monkey on your back all the time. So we need that monkey off our back bad.
Yeah. I went to the Georgia Alabama game last year. I noticed that you guys play Georgia the week that Florida State's on a bye. So that could be my road game this year. We'll see. I've never been to I've been to Knoxville, but I've never been to Neyland, and so I
Yeah,
have been
Neyland's
looking.
it's a special place.
I've been looking at weeks. Yeah,
If it's at night, it's the loudest place I've ever been.
yeah. All right, last one on the Tennessee stuff is I mean, the expectation has to be to get back to the playoffs, right? I mean, that has to be where you're at. I feel like with the SEC, I mean, you obviously want to win an SEC title, but so much of that goes. You could have a 4-team, 5-team tie at the top and get left out because of a tiebreaker. So I don't know. I feel like the value of conference championships. No coach is going to tell you this, well, except for maybe Lane. But the value of conference championships maybe isn't even as important as it was a few years ago. But the expectation has to be 10-2, worst case, right? Get back to the playoff.
They've got us at 9.5 in Vegas, and I think it's going to be tougher to get to 10-2 this year. I think it's up to if Nico plays really well, I think we can do it. If he struggles some and plays good but not great, or gets injured, then we're going to have a problem because we'll have to put in a young guy and a guy that's not that has a lot of experience. I think Nico, it's kind of where he takes us, honestly. He's a very important part, and our defense needs to play like it did last year. And unfortunately, our great cornerback tore his ACL in Texas working out. And I was just like, oh, no. And that guy was Jermod McCoy, who just really saved our bacon in the Alabama. He saved our bacon in multiple games. I don't know if he's going to be ready to go by the start of the season. He probably won't.
With recovery times, hopefully you could get them back at worst case mid-season. We have seen some of these guys, man. Obviously, they 9-10 months, and if you could get them back for a run late, probably wouldn't complain about it.
That's probably the best case scenario is getting middle of the season.
Yeah. Jay, where can people follow you? Where can they find your content?
Oh, just Sports Talk Jay on YouTube. That's it for me. I'm not much anywhere else. I just like having a good time doing videos on YouTube.
Yeah, I love your stuff. I love tuning in. I love watching. And y'all go check him out. We'll put it in the description. Thanks for hanging out, buddy.
No worries.